Well, Governor Tim Walz has been caught in several big lies. This guy is just digging his own grave. The lies are going to make him lose his governorship, which I couldn't be happier about. To help me go through this and more fraud, I have Lisa Damuth. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Just so my audience knows, Lisa is a state representative. She's also the Speaker of the House. So this is somebody high up in government that has insight on what is going on. Lisa, I got to tell you, my audience is furious with Tim Walz. This is some of the biggest fraud in American history. They feel like their money has been stolen. Minnesota has been defrauded, and then that money is just being shipped out of the country. What was your first reaction when you learned about the different ways that American taxpayers were being defrauded under Tim Walz?
Stephen, it's really important for your audience to recognize that this isn't new fraud under Governor Walz. There has been fraud that has riddled his entire time, his 7 years as governor here in the state of Minnesota. So far, there have been 28 allegations of fraud scandals. The most recent, or the one that's getting the top attention, is this Feeding Our Future. The other thing that's important to recognize, these aren't just state dollars. These are federal tax dollars. So it affects all of us when this money is going out. But there is something in the state of Minnesota called the Office of Legislative Auditor. That's a nonpartisan office that looks at different agencies and programs within that. Stephen, under Governor Walz, we've recognized that there has been a lack of internal controls in Department of Human Services, in Department of Education, and many other agencies during his entire time. The worst part is, now that it's getting national attention and Governor Walz is acknowledging the fraud, he's never fired a single state employee over this.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I knew there was some cover up until he couldn't anymore. Now he's trying to claim credit, but he's not even firing the very people that have allowed this to happen.
Yes, in fact, in Department of Human Services, the person that is the acting commissioner right now has been in Department of Human Services here in Minnesota since 2017 and was a compliance officer. Part of that role is to oversee the compliance within the agency. Clearly, there's been fraud over the last number of years. Now that person is the acting commissioner appointed by Governor Walz, where for months they're looking for an actual commissioner. So that's the level of fraud that has been allowed to go on. And the media in Minnesota hasn't covered it as widely and broadly as they should have. I'll just be kind about that. One of the best things that happened here in the state of Minnesota was when Governor Walz was put on the national ticket to run as Harris's VP pick. We finally started getting some national attention, where I was saying we had in 2023, we had an $18 billion surplus in our state budget. In 2023, Democrats were in full control here in the state. That entire surplus was spent, some of it ongoing, not all of it. Taxes and fees on all of us here in Minnesota were raised another $10 billion. We already had record fraud feeding our future, and yet our kids can't even read at grade level. That is the state of Minnesota right now under Governor Walz and his time as governor.
Wow. Okay.
Where to start, right?
Yeah, I had Royce White on, who ran for president, or let's see. No, Senate. It wasn't Senate. Thank you. And he was telling me how the taxes keep going up and the reading level keeps going down, and just like children's futures are just being stolen. And he was the one that pointed out to me that they don't really care about that. They just care about the power. It was the first time that someone ever pointed it out to me that way. But, Ilhan Omar is now saying, hey, the Somali community was defrauded. Tim Walz is now saying, hey, I'm cracking down on these people and putting them in jail. I'm going to show a video that you posted over on X that I think my audience will enjoy. Let's watch this together and then we'll react to it. But this goes through how Tim Walz is just lying to the American people.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and his political allies continue to incorrectly claim that the state was responsible for stopping the massive Feeding Our Future fraud, despite the evidence that's come out in each trial and the legislative audit that was done proving that false. This week at an event, Walz claimed the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which the governor oversees, investigated the case, then handed it over to the federal authorities who charged it. The truth is, the BCA was not involved at all. It was the FBI. Then on CNN, St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter said this.
And by the way, those fraud allegations were uncovered by local law enforcement, and our state attorney general pressed charges. Our state law enforcement presence is what caught that, is what held those folks accountable.
Again, it's not true that local law enforcement uncovered the fraud. And who prosecuted it? It was the U.S. Attorney's Office, not the state attorney general. Look at the timeline here from the legislative audit. In February 2021, the FBI actually first contacted the Minnesota Department of Education about fraud allegations that they had heard about. Then in April 2021, MDE provided info to the FBI about the fraud. Remember how there was also a lawsuit after the Education Department did try to stop paying the fraudsters? Well, in that case, the Attorney General's office and MDE did not even tell the judge that fraud was the reason they wanted to stop paying. Look at this damning deposition of MDE Assistant Commissioner Darren Cordy during that civil case. Feeding Our Future's lawyer asks, did you ever address with the commissioner the possibility of there being any fraud in the meal programs? Cordy answers, no, not in those terms. Then, does MDE, to your knowledge, have any reason to suspect there's been intentional acts of fraud with respect to the meal programs? And Cordy answers, no. At this point, I've reported over 100 stories on the Feeding Our Future case. I know an untrue statement about this case when I see one. If this talking point from the governor continues, you can consider this the fact check.
Okay, so do you think that they are just hoping that the media is going to run cover for them? Are they hoping the American people are too stupid or too distracted, or that Tim Walz can just smile and say, well, I'm a dummy, and get away with it? Your thoughts, because this guy's having his whole life blown up right now, and I love it.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that you showed your audience that clip, because when that came out, that is one of the best bits of coverage that we've had, because we typically don't see the truth about this being exposed in our local media. We just don't. We've got some that are doing an excellent job, but not everybody. What I would say, though, is there's no way that Governor Walz can run from this fraud anymore. This has finally started to catch up with him, and Minnesota taxpayers are going to be holding him accountable. With autism services, I just want to give you this example. Autism services, and now these are numbers within the Somali community, that when you figure 4-year-olds, the number of kids, 4-year-olds in the Somali community that have been diagnosed with autism so that they would then receive services from these providers, both the number of service providers have expanded in a large way, and it's almost 4 times the state average of autism cases with 4-year-olds. There's got to be something there. When you look at the Feeding Our Future, there were communities that were saying, some of these fraudulent organizations saying that they were feeding thousands of people a day when that was barely the population of the community. If DHS had been doing their job, you would have thought, even during COVID, because we had big restrictions here in Minnesota, that wouldn't you have thought a DHS inspector or an employee would have driven by those sites to make sure everyone was at least socially distanced at the time? If they were claiming to be, serving 100, 200, 1,000 people, nothing, no accountability. So when you see autism services go through the roof, wouldn't you ask, why is there such a concentration of cases of autism? What is going on? You would have thought there would have been more investigation, and yet there wasn't. It was just keep paying it out, keep paying it out. Now, people will say, well, Republicans, why didn't you step in? Why didn't you force anything to be changed at a legislative level? Democrats had full control here in the state government in 23 and 24. Full control, every vote needed to pass an expanding budget We couldn't hold it back. We could have hearings. We could have bills introduced. We couldn't get attention like we needed. I'm grateful for the U.S. Attorney's Office that has also been here to clarify things and really investigate.
Yeah. Wow. 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 That's crazy. You would think if you were handing out that level of money for that number of people and you go, wait a minute, this is more than the entire population. Like, what are they, like having Thanksgiving on our dime or something like that? So, I mean, I'm grateful that you guys are getting back control and that this whole thing is getting exposed. Had I known about it, I would have had you guys on earlier. But once I see corruption, I get it on my show as quick as I can. I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing on that. I had also read over the weekend that Trump's U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, called Tim Walz a liar, said, you're not the one that exposed the fraud, and it's actually the U.S. Treasury that's doing most of the heavy lifting. Is Tim Walz trying to salvage his reputation, and so he's just dripping these lies out to the left-leaning media? Or again, I'm just trying to figure out why he would tell these lies, knowing that he's not the one, he's not the hero that he's portraying himself to be.
I don't know why he tells the lies that he does, but if you looked at his national run for VP, there were a lot of lies, as far as his military service, where he was in China, when he was there. There were a number of lies that were coming through. But as far as with the Feeding Our Future cases and all of the fraud here in Minnesota, whether Governor Walz is lying to cover it or if he is seriously not aware, which I can't believe that, I don't know why, but either way it's happening. And as the governor of our state, you think of it in business terms as the CEO of our state, the responsibility is on him. I had done an interview back in October of 24, over a year ago, and I was asked, whose responsibility is all of this fraud? And I said, it's squarely on his shoulders. He's the head of the state. He's got to be the one in charge of making sure that taxpayer dollars are not wasted or sent out in fraud. The other thing that's really disappointing is we can be mad as taxpayers, which we should be, mad that our dollars are being stolen by fraudsters. But when you think of the people that actually needed these services, the actual people that existed for housing and for food and autism services, they weren't getting the services that they needed. And that's the disappointing thing. The most vulnerable amongst us needed help from the state, yet instead it was just going out to the fraudsters. And that is disgraceful.
If you've been living on credit cards just to cover groceries, gas, and bills, you know those interest rates are brutal. Why keep paying 20% or more to banks when you could call my friends at American Financing? They have mortgage rates in the 5s, and they are showing people every day how to keep more of their hard-earned money and keep it out of the hands of credit card companies. Right now, American Financing is helping homeowners save on average $800 a month by using their home equity to wipe out high-interest debt. With no upfront fee and no obligation, and just a 10-minute call to a salary-based mortgage consultant. And here's the kicker. If you start today, you could save 2 mortgage payments, putting even more cash in your hands right now. Don't wait. Call American Financing now at 888-686-8030. That's 888-686-8030, or visit americanfinancing.net/Gardner.
Yeah, I agree. I pay a lot in taxes, and I think, man, I don't mind it going to my fellow Americans, seniors, veterans, children. But when I see like illegal immigrants getting more benefits than a senior citizen or a veteran, and they've been here for 5 minutes, 5 months, something like that, or I see fraud like this, I think that money should have gone to Americans. And that's very disappointing. I don't know if you have any insight on this. Fox News, did a hit over the weekend, basically saying that a couple of different big players involved in this fraud have been connected to donating money to Ilhan Omar, have been connected to helping her with her campaign and getting the word out. I hope that Tim Walz and Ilhan, they weren't looking the other way, hoping no one would discover the fraud because they needed those votes in order to win. But I got to tell you, it doesn't smell good. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm grateful that everything is being investigated, especially by our federal partners. We need everything investigated to figure out who is doing the fraud, who is involved, at what level, and then make sure that our elections here in the state of Minnesota are going to be safe and secure. Thinking about elections, if I can just share this piece with you, past governors have always said in order to pass an elections bill, that it would have to be bipartisan. So Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, coming up with a bill together. The governor here in Minnesota, Governor Walz, for the first time in many years, compared to other governors, signed a Democrat-only crafted and voted on elections bill. Part of that included is we don't have voter ID here in Minnesota for elections, but you don't even have to have a permanent address to vote in Minnesota. You can describe where you are, and I'll use the word living, where you are, and then vote in those elections. That's how much things have changed under Governor Walz here in Minnesota. It's time that we take our state back, and we need secure elections that everyone has confidence that their vote will count and that the right actual Minnesotans are voting. We need that. We need to control our spending here. We need to make sure that our kids can at least read at grade level at a minimum. We used to be known for our educational outcomes. And then we have to end the fraud here in the state of Minnesota. That's what taxpayers expect. There needs to be consequences. If you are fraudulent here in Minnesota, you need to be held accountable. And we need all the checks and balances.
I didn't realize that you guys don't have voter ID, and that you can just I just live behind 7-Eleven. I'm in your district. I can. Wow. Okay. Yep. We got a lot to do. We need to get you in. So you're running for governor. Has that been made official or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I announced on November 2nd. And then a week later, I announced my running mate. His name is Ryan Wilson, and he ran for state auditor here in Minnesota in 22. And he was as a Republican, the closest statewide vote getter, losing by just over 8,000 votes.
Wow.
He would have been our state auditor. But he's an excellent guy, an attorney background, small business, family. We are a powerhouse ticket. There are a lot of Republicans that have announced right now. We have an endorsement that's the end of May with a primary that in August. But we are the only ticket, including Governor Walz, that have announced a running mate. I am the only candidate. Governor Walz doesn't even have a running mate at this point.
Well, he's too busy covering up fraud.
Yes.
So what just in our final minutes together, what made you're already the speaker, which is just amazing. Did you just see in your career or did this fraud thing just make you go, okay, we've just got to get conservative values. We've got to bring in new leadership. What made you actually say, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring?
Yeah, more the latter. And so serving in the legislature, I've been in for 7 years, and it's been an honor of a lifetime. Serving as speaker just this year, I was elected into this role in 2025. And when I've watched from the inside, the things that have happened to our state, watching under full Democrat control in the years 23 and 24, and then serving as minority leader now as speaker, I know I have much to offer the state of Minnesota to get things back on track. The things that we were known for before, those are lost when it comes to education and our tax dollars and taking care of our communities. And I said that I am the best candidate to win against Governor Walz. And so I'm ready to challenge him. I've won in negotiations this last year, ended the taxpayer-funded healthcare for illegal immigrants. That was a highlight of the Democrats. I ended that. And then I protected our non-public schools from cuts that were proposed. I also made sure that we had a $5 billion reduction in spending. When I talked about our budget exploding under Democrats, I made sure that we were cutting back that spending and then put in some safeguards for fraud, but we have much more work to do.
Okay.
And that was just with a tie. Let me tell you that, Stephen. I'm Speaker of the House for 2 years as a Republican, but we only have a tie in the House of Representatives. 67 Democrats, 67 Republicans, and I negotiated my way through, ended up with a Republican speaker, a fraud prevention committee, and this is some of the good work that I've been able to do.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. I'm going to just flash your X so that people can see that. But if they want to learn more or support you or financially support you, where can I point them towards?
Yep, lisa4mn.com, and that's LISAFORMN.com.
All right, I'll put a direct link. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.